All right, hello all and welcome to the Full Sail University Hall of Fame presentation on inclusion and diversity in the modern workplace. Let's give a big round of applause and a warm welcome for our panelists today and turn it over for our host, Monique Mason.
All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us. Welcome to our panel on inclusion and diversity in the creative workplace. As our host or introduction said, my name is Monique. I am a course director in the audio arts department. And to my left, we have Juan Peralta and Elbert Perez and Alex Sallee and Laurie Brugger over there on the end. So hopefully you guys know who all of these fine people are. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. So as I stated, the discussion today is about inclusion and diversity in the creative workspace or place. And what I want to first do is just give a couple synonyms for the terms that we're using. So diversity, some synonyms are variety, assortment, mixture, multiplicity. And then for inclusion, we have terms such as, let me look at my notes here, incorporation, embracement, and admittance. So hopefully you kind of let those words soak in for how we're using the terms today. So I want to kick off my first question to the panelists who are all in some creative aspect of what you all do. Does diversity and inclusion play a significant role in the creative process, in your opinion?
I'll start. I really like how you put those, you gave us some synonyms. That really helps to contextualize it. But diversity, it's teams, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about, is like groups of people, groups of human beings coming together, and everyone has different brains, and nobody knows how brains really work. They're all like really unique, and everybody looks at things slightly differently. And there's lots of factors in that. There's like people's brains, their habits, their likes, their dislikes, all of their background, what their parents are like. Like there's a million things, none of which you can control or identify. But I think getting the right mix of people on any team so that, you know, nobody's good at everything. So you have some people that are really good at this, some people are really good at that, and this person's great at that, but they also want to learn more about this other thing. So like putting groups together of people who have different ways of looking at any given problem means you have a better chance of coming up with a creative solution for that problem, because you have a lot of different ideas on the table because everybody's processing the needs in their own individual way.
Totally. First, I want to say I'm honored to be a guest here on Seminole land, who are the first caretakers and stewards of the land here in Florida. I think it's really important just to acknowledge the indigenous land that we're on, because no matter where you are in North America, people were murdered for that land. And just to pay respect, it's something our communities did back then, is to honor the people and, also honor the guests and stuff like that. So trying to continue that tradition now after, colonization and all the crazy stuff that's happened. But piggybacking onto what she was saying is when I work in film, sound for film, and, how are you supposed to reach an audience that's so diverse and not have a diverse crew that understands these people? I think you have to have a crew that is a mixture of cultures and different backgrounds to represent the work that you're putting out for the community that you want to view it. So I think that's the biggest for me, is making sure that we're making those connections to the final audience that is viewing this.
Great, that's a great way to say it. One thing I like to kind of clear up with a lot of people is like diversity isn't just about gender, race. A lot of it's socioeconomic status, where you grew up, the way you think. So think about diversity as a diverse set of differences as well, right? It's not just what's usually put up front is what race you are, what gender, what color, right? It's more than just that. And that being said, same thing with the tech industry. So I'm in the tech industry. one way of being a successful product is to have a big amount of people to use your product, right? So if, for example, I'm just going to use as an example, in the tech industry, we're mostly male-dominated, right? I'd say 90%, 80% of people in tech are mostly going to be male. And if you think about that, if you're creating a product mostly by males, you are excluding the other half of the population, which are female, right? So that's why diversity is so important. And like I said, right, the diverse set of inputs and views is super important in making sure that a product is better, right? And it's more fun to have diverse. You have more interesting stories to begin with, so to lighten that load, it's just a more fun environment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the good thing is that this is all a creative field, and there's a lot of artists, and so I think a lot of people in this industry, thankfully, are more open and welcoming than probably other industries that are really male-dominated and all that. So, in my instance, there's a diversity issue in the position I'm working in right now, where I would say 90% of all re-recording mixers are male. I can only name 2 or 3 female re-recording mixers, which is really a travesty. And so it's having more diversity in the workplace is just makes all the products that you're making, everything that you're doing, be able to be viewed from multiple angles makes it a better product. So I think it's super important, and I don't know, I'm hoping that there are more women in the audio industry that want to come through, because I think it needs it. I think we need different perspectives, and we need to do more, just looking at it from different angles. Like, if I make a mix move a certain way, somebody else might think, what, try it this way or whatever. And that is basically creating something new and exciting and fun. So,
Can I just talk just quickly about inclusion really quick?
Sure.
Because I take it for granted that, there's many different layers of diversity. Like you said, there's all different kinds. And some, in my workplace, I work in visual effects for movies. And most of my career has been in London, which is a hugely diverse place. People from all over Europe, work there regularly, and as well as people from all over the world. And now I live in Montreal, where the industry is new, which means that people are coming in from all over to help start these companies, and there's a lot of new talent and all of these people coming together from all different places and all different experiences. Inclusion is so important because it makes your life easier and better, because we run into a ton of issues all the time. People just communicate differently because they're from a different place, and they don't understand the nuances of one person's conversation, and it's a difficult thing to nail down as human, because you have your own perspective, and you don't know if what you're thinking, if what you're identifying is what everyone else is seeing. But just paying attention to it, just paying attention that to time to explain, to remove a little bit of the humor when you're dealing with a big international audience, because the nuances get lost across languages and cultures, and taking that time, that sensitivity to just be aware that maybe not everyone is going to get your joke, but yeah, that's my point. It's not a very solid ending. Sorry.
For some Full Sail students, as you guys know, our students come from all over. And for some, Full Sail is a huge culture shock. What are some suggestions that you guys may have for students who are here for the first time, in encountering other cultures, gender, whatever it may be? What are some suggestions you have for them to kind of explore their curiosity and get to learn better? Almost what Laurie was saying, without offending anyone, because we are, today is a very sensitive time, and people are afraid to ask questions. Some people have never met a Black person before. Some people have never met a Hispanic person before, or you know what I mean? So what are some suggestions that you guys have for them?
I mean, yeah, it's hard because I grew up in it. So, my family's Hispanic, and I interacted with all different cultures and stuff. And I try not to, I see them as a person. If you accept it as a person and you just be normal and ask questions and talk about things or whatever, I don't want to say like, oh, don't ask this question or don't say that or don't do that. But if you are a human being and you're kind to another human being, even if you don't, even if it's maybe uncomfortable or they look different or whatever, they're still a human being. And I just hope that people just look past that picture that they're putting in their mind of, oh my God, I've never met anybody like this. Just talk to that person, So don't really know if there's anything like specifically to say, just to be nice,
So I grew up in Manila. So going full sail, I mean, I visited America before, but full sail is the first time I lived in America, other than when I was a baby. Was just to say hi. I mean, one of my good friends I met as I was walking back from orientation. We were just walking back the same direction, like, hey, I'm Elbert. Hey, I'm Terrence. And we just kind of met and just made good friends. And we saw another guy, hey, I'm Elbert. Hey, I'm Fabio. So three of us became friends just walking home on orientation. And the important part is like saying hi, saying hello, right? That's the first step. And if there's something that offends you, if someone says something, talk to that person. Hey, that's kind of offensive. And just explain to them, right? Don't get like irrationally angry. Because a lot of times, these racists, what may sound racist is actually not racist to their mind. But if you educate them on why that's bad, 99% of the time that person like, oh, I should not say that, right? And it's a culture shock for a lot of people, especially Asia. In Asia, we're very heterogeneous, right? They don't mix. We don't get a lot of foreigners. It's a very hard place for someone to be. It's not diverse. But in America, where you can meet anyone from everywhere, it's an amazing place. So just say hi.
Yeah, I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, so I decided to go to college all the way across the country, basically, and never experienced really humidity, and that was kind of weird. And it's weird because you feel it kind of even inside, even though there's all this AC blasting, and I'm like trying to run outside to get fresh air. It's like, no, that's weird. You're just being compressed, but. I think, especially in a school like this, where there's probably a lot of introverts, because, as creatives, I definitely am a big introvert, and it's hard for me sometimes to make those connections with people. So it's like having to step out of your box and make those connections and finding your supports. But also, I think we have to look at our allies a little bit too, and ask for their support, and hopefully as an ally, you can reach out to other people, maybe people that aren't in your culture, in your gender, or in your sexual orientation. So I think it also, is our allies coming forward and helping with that as well. So yeah, I think a big part is just finding your support system. Like that kind of helped me get through college when I didn't really know anyone. I didn't know a soul here. Just kind of learning and talking to people, maybe it feels awkward, but it'll help you definitely get through these formative years.
Something I only really learned in the last few years is that people have different personalities. It gives them different tendencies. There's patterns. I think something that I always internalized in my life, that everyone is my reflection of them. You know what I mean? And it's all how I'm perceiving them. But first impressions are important because sometimes you only meet somebody once, and you can't help but make some kind of judgment on them because that's our nature in a way. But But it's so meaningless because there's so many variables to like what was going on at that exact moment when you met that person. And like maybe they were in a good mood, a bad mood. Maybe they were thinking about something else. Maybe you said something that triggered a memory, and they started thinking about, like, there's a million things. So I think taking those first impressions with a grain of salt, and also just recognizing that people do think differently and people are different. So like if somebody says something to you which you take a little bit harshly, actually asking them to clarify, what do you mean by that, is a very simple thing that you can do, that you can sort of, in a lot of cases, just remove that negative impression that you had from that person. Because culturally, I mean, I've been an immigrant for a lot of my adult life. I've lived in London and Canada, which is a neighbor. But you know, it takes a lot of energy to be an immigrant. You know, like you're always hypersensitive, especially at the beginning, to what the customs are, and that is real. Like, culture is real, and it affects the way that we communicate. So I think just recognizing that and giving people the opportunity to explain themselves in more detail and not judge them right away.
So just out of curiosity, let's say one of our students graduates and either goes for an internship or a job. And I know this is kind of personal preference sort of thing, but in your opinion, in going to apply for a job or at the interview, how significant is it to see diversity at the company that you're potentially applying to? Like, is that something you should look for? Is that something you should ask about? So let's say, like, Elbert, you get somebody coming to your company, and they're curious about the diversity. Do you think that's significant as an employer? To me, well, I know it is to you, but I'm just saying in general. Do you think that's something as a new employee that should be important to you?
Yeah, I think as part of the reverse interview process, you should ask, hey, what's the diversity policy in this company? As we all agree, right, a more diverse workplace is a better workplace, and that's just like a general good thing to have. But there is a lot of issues, right? Sometimes, especially with what happened with Riot Games, sometimes it gets so toxic because there's just one dominating culture or type of group of people that it kind of excludes the rest, and that's bad team culture. And as a student trying to work somewhere, you have the power as well to pick who your employers are, right? You're not always desperate enough that you want to work in a toxic environment, because that's why people quit. It's not because the job sucks. Mm-hmm. The job sucks because the people suck, right? You will stick with a job with the people that you love. So that's why it's important.
Mm.
I'd love to add to that.
Go ahead.
So as a female in audio, where women make up 5% of audio engineers, like within the industry, that's almost like not even an option to look at that. You're just trying to get your foot in the door. You're just trying to get a job. So no matter where you go, it's going to be male dominated. So it sucks that has to be a secondary thing to, to finding a job in a place that you would love to have a diverse workforce. But that's just not the landscape right now.
Mm.
You know, that made me think of something that I think asking questions in the interview is interesting, because there's presumably in a lot of cases you'll be applying for sort of established companies to some degree, and they have a pattern, they have a work pattern, and they have the way things are and the way things they want them to be. But actually, like, asking in the interview is a stimulant, right? It's like, if someone, I'm trying to put myself in those shoes, if somebody said, hey, so, what's the proportion of women, or like how many nationalities do you have, or whatever, like that would put that back in my mind, like, oh, this is important to young people coming in, like this is something that they're looking for, and it could make us more appealing to get the candidates that we really like if we have good answers to those questions, and basically it keeps the conversation alive and keeps people paying attention and thinking about it, and we have, and that's a part of the challenge, because one thing is to talk about it once, right, and that's a snapshot of all the people in the room at that exact time, and then there's all the energy of continuing that conversation, and like as the room moves and changes and the times and everything, like keeping that going is part of the challenge too.
And hopefully those people care,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
One of the things that the students are not a fan of is group projects. For various reasons. A lot of times, the number one reason is because one person always ends up doing the work, for the entire group. But another aspect of that is the diversity in the group. And if you could just kind of impart some good advice about getting involved in group projects, because for a lot of you, I mean, maybe not all of you, sometimes you do get to work by yourself, but other times you're working as a part of a team. And the diversity, as Elbert had mentioned, is not just about race or, gender identity or anything like that. It's also about how different work styles. So if you guys want to talk about, that aspect of either picking the group, working in the group with different, diverse work styles.
Yeah, I'm trying to count. I think my team is probably around 10 to 12 people. We have effects editors, dialogue editors, supervisors, assistants, and 2 mixers, and, well, there's a whole nother, departments and all that, but the core group that work together the most, probably like 12 of us. And everybody brings something to the table. Even if you don't think they do, they totally do. And it is, you really need that. You really need to be able to work with people. In this industry, if you can't get along and if you can't figure out a way to work together, this is the wrong industry, because everywhere you go, it's a team of people. It takes a village to make these movies. All this stuff. It takes a long time. The last movie I was on for 5 months, and it's a big team of people working together. So it's super important to hear people out, let their suggestions, all the suggestions, and politically learn how to talk through issues or problems and move on and go forward. So I can't stress enough how important it is to be able to get along with the people you work with. And not to say that everyone is going to get along, and I get that, and they're at work, there are a lot of individuals that you gravitate to because you have more in common and you work well together, and other people that you don't, and you just don't do stuff together. But there's always somebody else that you have to get along with, and you got to learn that very early on, that you have to be a people person. You got to be able to roll with it. You got to stand up when you need to stand up for something. You stand up and you do it. You do it in a nice way, and you use the right words and all that. But yeah, you have to learn how to come together, because it's crucial.
And group dynamics is like a science, right? You're not going to crack it. I'll tell you that right now. And like in visual effects, we have like all these teams, and it's constantly changing. So like every movie, we like put together a group, right? And that's our group in our department. And then there's different departments, all have groups, and then those groups get together, and it's just really complicated. It's super complicated. It changes with every project, right? So it's really normal that you have to get used to working with new people, right? And I guess some practical tips on that front is the beginning, right? The first time you get together, that's going to set the tone, right? So like brainstorm, engage everybody, everybody gets a chance to pitch in at the beginning and get excited and get on board, basically, with whatever project you're working on. Because I think it's easier to work by yourself because you're at your own pace. You know exactly what's going on. You don't have to communicate. Communication is like a huge part of work. So, and that's one thing you don't have to do if you're working by yourself. But that's just not the reality. So, but yeah, group dynamics is actually, if you're a bit geeky, It's something you can like dive into and like and get some tips. Like there's this one thing that I was thinking of. I can't remember the name of it, but the words that are coming out to me is when you put a new group together, or if you change one member of the group, then there's like these phases that the whole team goes through together. It's like a pattern. And the words that you could Google if you're interested are storming, which is one phase where everyone's like, oh my God, what's going on? Something changed. And then norming, which is like when things become more like level. But there's like a couple other phases. So yeah, that's something you could look at like for some tips and tricks.
I think if you want to apply it a little bit more on the group level, or where you guys at, in game dev, we do a lot of group projects, kind of because you have to, right? One thing, if you're working in a group, is find each person's motivation and put them in that path or that part where they're going to be most successful, right? Because the reason why usually there's only one person pulling their weight is because they got what they want and the rest got shafted, right? They didn't get what they want. But if you work as a group and communicate and talk, right? That's the important part.
Yeah.
Huge. There's no group work if there's no communication, right? Then you can find each other's motivation, give and take, right? It's not a zero-sum game. Like everyone can be a winner by finding the right, mix of workload and stuff like that. And then you will end up with a way better product than if you were being selfish. Being selfish is what destroys groups. So just be careful and think about that. And that translates way past your group and your school into your work, into your life, everywhere. Being selfish does not help.
No, it really doesn't. And it's not about you. Because the thing is I think one thing that's worth pointing at is that if you are a team player, then in the end you look good.
Yeah.
Like you might look awesome, like with every decision that you're making throughout the whole process. But if you're a pain to work with because you're only thinking about how you're looking, then you're going to look really bad at the end, even if you look good to yourself every day. At the end, everybody's going to be like, ugh.
In the end, the product suffers, right? So you could be like, oh, I carry this, but the product sucks. Doesn't matter if you did the most work, the product sucks. But if you work in a group, collaboratively, the product is awesome, then everyone is happy and you keep working. And yeah.
I think that's important to acknowledge because a lot of employers are looking for you guys, being the students, focus a lot on your success rate. But it's not always about how successful the project was, it's the process. We're always talking about the process, not just the end result. And I know you guys want to get good grades and you want your project to be the best, but think about the process of getting to where the ending was, whether it was good or bad. Think about what happened there and what the group dynamic was really about, and let that kind of be a good way to guide you through some of these diversity. And I felt like we were focusing too much on diversity, but what Elbert and I forgot.
Laurie?
I was going to say Laurie. Yes, thanks. Sorry, Laurie. What Elbert and Laurie were just saying kind of made me think, okay, we did work inclusion back into it, because one of the things that, and even as adults, we still do this to some degree, is we leave people out. And that's where bullying comes from. And believe it or not, adults still, shame on them, but adults still do it. What are you guys seeing in your workplaces, evidence that your employer is trying to include the diverse people in the workplace? Are you seeing any efforts where you guys are?
Yeah, at Skywalker, where I work, there's been and it's probably happening industry-wide, there's been a big push to have more women in audio. Mm-hmm. And we get phone calls all the time about, I would love a name of sound designers or a name of mixers that are women. They want to have a woman on the project. And it's a big push. It's happening, everywhere, I think. And so we're trying. I mean, all our interns, we're still trying to pick the best person for the job, but at the same time, we have those things in the back of our mind. Well, she's just as qualified as him and all that. So, you know, it's definitely happening there in the, you know, that push to have more women in audio.
And I'm glad you made that distinction, because there are people who will argue something like affirmative action, for example. For that reason, they
Right.
think, well, this company is looking to hire this minority group or, you know, this gender. They're still looking for the most qualified person. I think people
Correct.
forget that. And nobody wants that stipulation to be there, but it's necessary because there are still people at the hiring level who are not concerned about diversity and inclusion, and that is a problem. So
Yeah,
I like that.
I think it's a slippery slope. It's not, I don't want anybody to be, oh, we're just going to hire a bunch of women, you know,
Right,
is it-
yeah,
or
yeah.
we're just going to hire, you know, it's like, let's do it, you know,
least
smart.
bring them to the
Yeah,
table.
bring everybody to
Yeah.
the table. Let's look at everything and make an educated decision about
Right,
it. Yeah.
right.
So the company I work for, Framestore, is helping to develop this project called Access VFX. There's a website called accessvfx.com. Because one of the issues that, you know, because I'm in a hiring position, but one of the issues that I face is that I don't get a very diverse group of applicants. And yeah, so Access VFX is kind of about explaining a little bit about the visual effects world in like a consolidated place that isn't like promotional to any given company, like trying to show things off like for their own sake, but actually for exposing a little bit what the jobs are in visual effects for a younger audience. So for teenagers and even younger sometimes, and people in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s that may want to get into visual effects. So so that's one example of something that like visual effects industry is actively, like a few people at different companies got together and was like, what are we going to do about promoting this as a career path to a wider group of people so that it becomes an option for them, and it's something that they think about as a potential career path.
That's so true, because I think a lot of the times we are looking at our networks, like especially in audio, it's like who you know, and like you're just looking at the people around you and who they know, and sometimes it's like there just isn't women there, or like different groups of people, and that's something we struggle with at LinkedIn too. Is like I don't even know any other female audio engineers, like personally, like it's all dudes. So yeah, it's just, I guess it'd be great to figure out a way to pull into those other networks and have them, you know, come forward or something.
Right. So I heard a lot of like, hey, the people applying there's nothing to select from, right? And that is a problem. And that's the cool thing about now, right? When I look around this room, if you ask me what this room makeup would be 10, 15 years ago, it would be probably mostly male, right? And now it's a very, well, obviously we're in a diversity panel, but but just seeing like a good mix of male, female, whatever race, and you know whatever, is good because everything starts in education. And you know, Full Sail has changed a lot from being called full male back in the day to actually we've forgotten that saying, which is great, right? And it's a long-term kind of move. It's not going to be fixed overnight. It's going to take many generations, hopefully not that many generations. But the more we talk about it, the more is the back of our heads or front of our minds, the faster it gets where diversity won't be an issue because it's just normal, right? I want it to be where it's reversed, where if it's all male, all female, or all whatever, that it feels weird, right? The norm should be, hey, the room is full of different people. That's awesome.
Did you want to say?
No.
Okay. So I want to give you guys a chance to ask some questions. I was going to wait a little bit longer, but I feel like some of you may have some questions. So I would like to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. So just raise your hand. We have a microphone that's going to come around, and we'll get to you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Nix. I'm in the Entertainment Business Master's Program. And thank you all for being here. It's been a wonderful talk. My question is, when you were talking about inclusion, and I love everything that everyone is saying because it is ultimately about respect. But like age, for example, that's a topic that's not being talked about. You know, I've been aged so much faster now just because a lot of times young people feel excluded from older groups. And as an older person, I'm like, well, I want to know what's going on. I want to get with it, but I don't want to be 20 years old anymore. I like my age. I'm happy there. And there's a lot of things I can teach or be around. I might not be, the young one doing everything, but I can keep up. So it's harder for me right now to accept that pill a little bit because it's like, all right, I'm old now, older, I should say. And I'm in the workplace with these fresh faces, and they have these wonderful ideas and stuff, but they don't necessarily want to gel or might not even know if I'm interested in what they have going on. So as a person that's older, and that wants to be included with the young folks, with the older folks, I'm kind of middle range, So what advice would you give someone like me who's like, this is a whole new career change for me, all the older folks think I'm crazy, and all the younger folks are like, oh, that's pretty cool, So I'm just trying to find that balance. So
I think it's important to make sure you all know that there are protected classes when it comes to these things, and age is one of them. So that's something you should be aware of, just so we're clear from a legal perspective. But entering into those fields, I mean, that's, I'll let somebody else go. I need to think about it for a minute, because my personality is very different on that approach.
So a lot of that ageism happens to be because we overwork people in the industry, right? And obviously, as you get older, usually maybe the health isn't there, or you have family, right? And that's really what's happening. Is like you have to be in this 80 hours, 60 hours, crazy work hours. Well, I have a life, right? So companies that work towards work-life balance, the ageism is actually fixed. So when I was working at Microsoft, I would be working with people who are close to retirement, or we're like 20 years apart, but we're like good friends working together. It's because that we have that work-life balance, right? We can figure that out. So that's one approach. But yeah, you are right. Age is something that we need to talk about more as our workforce ages, right? I mean, even millennials, right? There's a lot of millennials kind of with kids now and realizing that, and we have Gen Z coming in. It's gonna be a pretty interesting work environment.
And it's good to bring it up, because I was like, yes, you're right. and it's something that I recognize in myself, like not from my personal experience, but I do that to people, and it's something I need to keep in mind all the time, because it's just so unfair, because you judge people, and you have to stop, you have to control it and be aware. But I think it's in my industry, in visual effects, the industry is relatively young-ish, right? And people, supervisors and stuff, people at the top of their career paths are in their late 40s now, So it's starting to change a little bit more, but definitely historically it's all young things, coming up through the artist groups. And that would mean that anyone applying for a job that's not in their 20s is an odd one out, and that it makes you other them and think about things differently because they're standing out in some way, which is really detrimental and really unfair. And it's important to keep in mind and look at things completely objectively and try to overcome those biases that you get. And train those things back. But it's also really challenging, because in a workplace, when you're trying to get established, we're cliquey, we're really cliquey people, and there's this friendship groups and this and that, and they're all rubbing, patting each other's back and going out for lunch and all this stuff, and you don't have to do that to be successful. I think if you're professional and you're interacting with everyone equally, you don't have to be in the friendship group in my industry to succeed. You have to do your work well. You have to communicate well. You don't have to be best buddies with everybody and have loads in common with the 19-year-old next to you.
And I think it's important to educate them. Laurie and I were in a panel earlier, and one of the things that I had said was, you got to call people out. And being the semi-older person in the group, that may be the role that you play by being brought into that atmosphere for them. Because I think a lot of young people are thinking, and I'm not going to speak for all of you, but for many, it may be one, oh Lord, this person's going to be like my mom, or to, oh Lord, this person's old and slow, right? So, but you're at the top of your game. You just finished the program. And, especially if it's your peers, it's like, keep in mind, I'm in the same class as you're in. And I don't know what your GPA is, but I know I've been getting A's in class. I'm not struggling. I'm getting this. So sometimes you just gotta put it out there and let that switch go off on them. So here's where that inclusion comes in, guys, right? So don't dismiss someone just because they're older, or, you know what I mean? Like, this is where that inclusion starts to come in. And I would love to challenge you guys, if you catch yourself doing that, then stop and bring that person in for the fact that you didn't want to. Now, if that person has a reputation for not doing work and, being the problem in the group, then don't do it. At that point, you have a legitimate reason to not include that person into what you're doing. But if you catch yourself doing it because it's a stereotype, ageism, whatever it may be, I think that's a good moment to educate yourself and get to know that person as a person. Like Juan was saying, we are all people, right? So, but I think for you as potentially the older person in the group, sometimes you just got to call them out on it and make your point.
Thank you. And also, like in sound recording, I learned how to engineer on my own because I loved it, but I never thought I could ever have a job and a career for it. So growing up, I don't have kids, I'm still kind of irresponsible. I might be 75, just, I'm still learning what
Sure.
emo is.
Yeah.
So I'm living this life and I'm taking it all in. But if sound recording for me as a woman having an option,
Right,
wasn't an option.
Right.
It's an option now.
right,
Fantastic for somebody like me. It's
yeah.
like, I mean, what, we can go and we can record songs I love, but that wasn't an option. So
Mm-hmm.
now that it is an option, it's like, oh, now you're an old lady and you're a business girl, So, and that's kind of it. It's like, that's how life has changed just
Yeah.
that fast,
Yeah.
But to me, I look at it as awesome too, because there are opportunities that just weren't there,
Yeah.
So, and now that they are, and we're being included in that situation, now it's like, all right, well, we'll figure this thing out, but I'm gonna figure it out. So
Yeah.
I appreciate this panel. Thank
Good.
you.
But it's something that you were saying like earlier, how the younger group has all these ideas and stuff. It's because they don't have any of those things in their mind. That's like, yes, but, because you've got more experience. So your unique role in that group could be, okay, guys, let's catch some of these ideas and let's make it happen. How do we actually do this thing? Because you can bring the experience and the advice to them, yeah. So identifying what's your superpower because you have a few years on them, and using that to your advantage.
All right, we have a question over here.
Hi.
Hi.
I've got some concerns. I'm about to graduate, and I am planning on going in the game industry in some way, shape, or form. But I'm also I'm very outwardly queer. I came out several years ago, and it's the best decision I ever made in my life. And I know that the games industry has a reputation for being very insulated, very. It's not the greatest place for diversity, at least not from what's been cropping up online and stuff. And I'm really worried that I'm going to have to shut myself back in the closet and, not be able to be myself at the same time, that I'm doing what I love that I want to do with the rest of my life. So I'm not really sure if it's safe for me to be myself until I've tested the waters, or if I just have to, shut myself down a little bit or do something else until the games industry decides to open back up.
One thing you're not going to get from this panel is we are never going to tell you to be someone you're not.
Yeah.
No.
And not be yourself. So I just want to put that out there. I'm going to let Elbert
Yes,
run with
please.
this
Yeah.
one first.
So here's the thing, right? And most of the game companies are typically in a liberal city, right? So LA, Seattle, there's some in New York, Austin, right? And these cities were very, you're normal there. You're just plain person there, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Do you make good games? Awesome. You have cool hair, because like, yeah, I have red hair, right? So I obviously don't care. But that's like a minor thing, right? But being like your gender, like, and we have capital, like in Seattle. So I'm going back to Seattle. Seattle, like, we love and celebrate pride, right? It's like, it's on the sidewalks. You're queer, shit. If you're not queer, like, what are you doing? Why are you a square, right? It's a creative field, right? Being creative requires expression. And a lot of reasons why normal people are like normal, because the corporate world has squished you into a square, right? But it doesn't have to be. Even Microsoft. Microsoft has so many diverse initiatives. It's a big corporate company, right? Sure, some groups might be a little bit more square because they're business groups and whatever, but the creative groups, man, like all hair colors, all genders, all kinds of backgrounds. So don't ever let that kind of stop you. And even if someone does stop you, like, say fuck him, right? Whatever. But it's true, right? You have to have the attitude, like, this is my life. I'm gonna be who I am, because if you let someone else define who you are, you're gonna be miserable.
Yep.
And I don't want you to be miserable.
Yep.
I have a question. This fear that you have about graduating and getting a job in the game industry, is it a certain game company, or are you?
I'm familiar with a lot of female game devs and women who work in the game industry. I'm familiar with a lot of female game devs. Like I follow a lot of people in that, you know, women who work in the games industry. And there's, you know, when Gamergate happened, I'm a huge fan of Zoe Quinn, and everything that she went through kind of opened up the floodgates to reveal all of this terrible garbage that the games industry has been hiding for a while, for a long time. So I'm just worried that it's gonna happen to me.
So here's the thing, right? Of course, there's going to be a lot of sexism, and a lot of that came from a few people. I would say personally, from the game industry I've worked in, most people are accepting. They don't care really, like, what you are or who you are. There's always going to be bad apples, right? And they get shut down really fast. And sometimes management allows it to happen. Maybe they're protected because they're buddies with someone, right? But those are few and far between. It just gets surfaced a lot in the media, right? But I'm not saying anyone who's experienced it, it's anything less. It's bad, right? And should not ever happen, but it happens. But that should be the least of your concerns. Your first concern should be, hey, am I doing a good job as a game designer? And then kind of, obviously, I mean, if it's a really bad situation where it's a bad place, yeah, don't ever work there.
Right.
But I would say most game companies, because come on, I mean, why would we not want someone who's talented? And why does it matter if you're queer, straight, whatever, bi? It doesn't matter. So just take that into consideration. Be on guard, because it has to be, right, for any female out there, because, you know, we all know those issues, right? Mm-hmm. It's not going to go away anytime soon until we fix it somehow in our society. But what I'm saying is that with your career, because you want that career, right? That's why you went through Full Sail. Anything else is like to the side.
Yep.
Sure, once you're in there, you can tackle it the way you need to. But that is the reality where we live in. But it's not a toxic, dangerous place. Sure, some companies are, but majority don't want that, because it's not good. Toxic work is bad.
It's not.
Then just the last part to answer your question while we look for the next question. So raise your hand so she can get to you. Really quick, one, do your research on the company that you want to work for, and make sure the environment there is one that is supportive of you being you. Don't ever go work somewhere just because it's the top game company, but you feel like you have to suppress who you are. That's a no-no.
And reach out to these women, right?
Yeah.
Everyone in the game industry is so open, right? Reach out to them, especially you know, another woman reaching out to another woman. It's a very tight group there, and most of the female devs that I know and artists, it's a tight-knit group, and they will accept you for who you are.
Is there a women's game group?
Yes, there is. Game developers, so women's in games. There's a lot of diversity groups and all this stuff. There's
So
even
check
black
out
in
some of
game.
those too if you haven't already. All right, okay, there she is over there. Go ahead.
Okay.
Here you go.
So I wanted to ask. So you say you've applied for your job and you've, well, it's a job that you wanted to apply for and everything's going fine. then sometimes you reach like some points where, again, it's a situation of like being female and stuff, like men would like want to say that you're getting better because you're sleeping around with someone or something. How do you combat that? Because sometimes it's just like, I'm not even doing anything at all. I'm just being who I want to be, and people are now criticizing me.
So someone's spreading false information about you
Yes.
that's potentially affecting your reputation?
Yes.
We call that defamation. And technically, you could legally go after someone doing something like that. So the first thing you want to do is document what happened. Obviously, like Elbert was saying, you keep doing the best work that you do. That person may have a reputation for doing that. So the goal is for you to focus on your work. If this is a work environment and there's an HR department, report it to Human Resources, okay? If it's a school environment, report it to your instructors immediately, and follow up on it and make sure somebody is doing something about it. But other than that, I'm trying to think, I had another thing and I just lost my train of thought, but if anybody wants to jump in, feel free. But that's my main thing. That's called defamation. And if anybody else heard it, make sure you get their information. But spreading false information about people is a huge, and we should know that. You know, that's very childish. And in my opinion, that's also someone who's afraid of you. That's somebody who's seeing that you can do better than them, so they found a way to cut you down. So now you stand up for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really sorry if that happened to you.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Oh, okay, good. I was getting mad.
That's scary.
But you know,
Who is it?
just for like, it's good to have all the practical advice about, you know, steps to take, because that's so important, and that's the only way that
Yeah.
to move forward. But just like mentally, like for strength, on the topic of women being classified in that sort of way, you know, like a sexualized way. Have you ever heard the term gaslighting?
Yes.
So I think sometimes it's good to just have a word for something. And it's not exactly that, because I don't know what the word for that is, but I'll tell you what the other one is. So gaslighting is basically when, and I don't know if it's specific to men and women, but it's basically making someone feel like they're crazy to make them irrelevant, basically. So trying to like convince someone that they're acting crazy, so that therefore everything they say is like, you can just dismiss it and you don't have to pay any attention to it. I relate that in some way to that, because I see that in men and women a lot. And having like some like scarlet letter, like, you know, sexualized, like reputation spoilage. I put it in that category. It's a way to control you, basically. It's a way to like make you irrelevant. And it's that person trying to have power over you, and it's their own weird universe, and they should be held accountable for that. But for you mentally, you know, it can be quite destructive. So I think like staying aware that has more to do with them than it has to do with you, and that it happens, and it's not about you. It's
Right.
about their weird stuff, and it's not like specific to you.
All right, we have time for one more question. I don't know where the microphone is. Okay.
Hello, how are you guys doing today?
Hi.
So this kind of touches on the gaslighting subject. So I'm in music production. I'm a music producer. Everybody I work with is men. I don't work with any other women unless the occasional artist is a woman. How do you keep yourself from, say they do something and you're the only woman there, so you don't know if they're acting that way because you're a woman or because of that's just the way they act. So how do you keep that, like keep your whatever version of diversity it is, how do you keep that from affecting everything that you do? Like, say they don't like something that you did. Is it really because I'm a woman and there's nothing wrong with it? Or did I actually do something wrong?
I mean, this is the tricky element of everything. It's like, because you don't know, you'll never know what's going on in people's minds, and sometimes they're behaving in a certain way, and you know, they meant it in this way, and you took it like this, and it's so complicated. And like, I think there's the things that are obvious, you know, we'll just put those to the side. It's the more subtle things. And I think, how do you handle that from affecting everything you do? Do you mean like because it knocks your confidence and it makes you feel like you're being like inspected in a different way? Or what do you mean by how does it affect your...
Yes, so it's kind of like the gaslighting thing where will make you feel crazy to like diminish everything that you did.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a very similar situation in that. Is it being crazy or...
No. Again, in these situations, it has to do with them. It doesn't have to do with you most of the time. I mean, maybe you've done something that's irrational, right? But I think there's the thing that somebody says, and then there's the way that the other person perceived it. And sometimes those things are very different. And what I've found in my experience is when you have colleagues, right? And they're not like outwardly insulting you, or it's more subtle and you're not sure. And it goes back to like that cultural thing I was talking about, you know, like people coming from different places and you're not sure what's going on there. Like taking that, unless it's outwardly offensive or rude, in which case you have to immediately shut it down. What I found useful is taking that person to the side and saying, what did you mean by this? And, you know, get clarification on what their intention was. It gives them the opportunity. Oh, okay. It gives them the opportunity to clarify, but also the opportunity to actually find out what actually happened, so you don't have to obsess about it.
All right, so that wraps it up for us, guys. Thank you so much. If you have any further questions, you can catch us on our way out the door. Thank you so much, everybody.